Cuadra. I am the Executive Director of the Central American Resource Center, Carecen of Northern California, and proud treasurer of Alianza Médicas, a transnational network of immigrant-led organizations. Thank you all for joining Carecen San Francisco for this afternoon's town hall with our special guest and Califaslan's first Latino United States Senator Alex Padilla. We want to start this afternoon with the Native American land acknowledgement from the Human Rights Commission in San Francisco. We Latinx, immigrant, and allied communities acknowledge that we are on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. As the indigenous stewards of this land, and in accordance with their traditions, the Ramaytush Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as the caretakers of this place, as well as for all peoples who reside in their traditional territory. As guests, we recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland. We wish to pay our respects by acknowledging their ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush community and by affirming their sovereign rights as First Peoples. My deepest apologies for that phone. All my relations. To frame this conversation, we want to note that in the United States, the Latinx population represents close to 20% of the total US population. We also want to highlight that in California, Latinos represent close to 40% of the total population. California's Latinx population represents 26.4% of the total Latino population in the nation. For this reason, we know that the time is now. We need a Latino and immigrant equity agenda for the future of California and for the future of our nation. Thank you everyone for joining us. And now I'd like to pass the word to our Board of Supervisors President Shamon Walton, who will be doing opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Larissa and Senator Padilla. I just want to start off by saying what a privilege and an honor it is to be able to greet you on behalf of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. As you know, we are a city that prides itself in celebrating diversity and leaders of color. I want to thank you for providing an example of the heights that we can reach here in the state. I'm also excited to greet you as an ally to the Latino community and as someone who knows the importance of all of us working together to improve the lives of the people who need us the most. Thank you for being at the forefront of immigration reform and for participating in this town hall. We support inclusion of our migrant community and are grateful to be in a city that is fighting for equity for everyone. So once again, Senator Padilla, I just want to thank you for being here and thank you so much for your service.
Thank you, Board President Shamon Walton. You have been a fearless champion and you've stood with us side by side every step of the way in the struggle for immigrant justice. Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce very proudly our first Centroamericana Latina elected member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, also Salvadoreña, Mirna Melgar.
Thank you so much, Larissa and Carecen team, for your ongoing leadership and advocacy to advance a comprehensive Latinx policy agenda. For too long, our community has been considered a sleeping giant, treated often as an afterthought, relied upon in times of need and crisis while our own needs are ignored. Latinx have never been at the center of a policy agenda, local, statewide, or nationally, and this must change. 40% of California identifies as Latinx, and nationwide Latinos are the second largest segment. We accounted for 51.1% of the country's growth, rising to 18.7% of the US population, according to the numbers from the 2020 census. That's a 23% increase in the Latino population over the last 10 years, and we are young. The average age of Latinos is 27 years old, as opposed to 58 for the white population. And these are powerful numbers. The nation's future is Latinx. And the time for is long overdue for our community to just be recognized for our political, economic, social, and cultural impact, but to be equitably represented in leadership and influence. That's why we are so proud of you, Senator Padilla, representing the community and all of Californians with your leadership. Our community can no longer be ignored, and we have seen the devastating effects of this pandemic on Latinos. I am the first Latina to be elected to the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco without an appointment first by our mayor. And I'm both proud to represent the community, but also it hurts me that, we have gotten to 2021 without a Latina being elected to the Board of Supervisors in progressive San Francisco, in progressive California. So that is to say, it is time for equitable representation of our community. We are changing the tide, but there's so much more work ahead. The time is now that we in positions of leadership have to challenge the status quo, speak up for the community, and ensure that there is a Latinx policy agenda at every level, and to demand that we have leadership that is accountable to the community. It's great to be here with all of you, and welcome Senator Padilla to this long overdue conversation. Thank you, Larissa.
Thank you, Supervisor Melgar. All the stats, I had them all written down. Thank you for sharing that. Senator Padilla, we heard you on NPR and we've been following you, and we know that your political engine was fueled in part by 187 in California, that chapter of her story that changed really the course of our activism, our organizing in the state of California. So before I hand it over for your opening remarks, I just kind of want to leave you with a question, an important question, and that is, how do your personal experiences as a member of our community, as a child of immigrants, define and inform your approach to your political leadership? And again, Senator Padilla, thank you so much for making time for joining us virtually in San Francisco and the Bay Area. We're so proud to have you here.
Well, thank you, Larissa, and thank you, Supervisor Walton, for being with us, and Supervisor Melgar for your trailblazing leadership as well. I guess I'll tackle the question before some initial remarks to set the stage for additional Q&A today. If the question is, how does my life experience, inform, I like to think inspire my job day in and day out? It's summed up by saying, you're damn right I take my job personal, right? Because whether we're, fighting for equity in education or access to healthcare, environmental justice, immigration reform, or anything else, it is fueled by, my family's journey, our life experience, and the awareness that not only do we deserve a seat at the table, we deserve to be heard when we are at the table and have an equal say in policy and any work product that comes out of the United States Congress or the state government, local government, public sector, private sector, academia, et cetera. So it's a collective commitment to not just policy, but representation and advocacy to advance what's right for our community, what's right for our state and the nation. So I am not sorry. I'm unapologetic when I say I do take my life personal, my job personal. Let me, I guess, further reflect on what this event means to me and the timing of this event. Because for those of you who haven't heard on NPR or read some of the prior interviews I've done, as I transitioned from California Secretary of State to the first Latino to represent California in the United States Senate, tremendous honor, tremendous opportunity, tremendous responsibility. I know that it's because, number one, of my parents' journey, their struggle, their sacrifice to come to the United States in pursuit of a better life. Their, for all their love, equal share of discipline in raising my sister, my brother, and I, their encouragement to do well enough in school as the key to getting ahead in life. But I also give tremendous credit for all the community leaders, all the advocates and activists over the course of generations that insisted on opportunity for future generations, insisted on representation through volunteering, through advocacy, through voting, to help create these very opportunities for those that have come before me, for me at this time, and as a part of what we have to carry on for future generations. I say that I take my job personally because I carry my family's journey every day that I walk the halls of the United States Congress. As many of you do know, I hope, my parents came to the United States in the 1960s from Mexico, like so many others over the course of generations, in search of a better life. Now, they weren't blessed with a lot of formal education. My dad only had the opportunity to go to school through the first grade before stopping to work to help the family. My mom, we said, was the lucky one. She had a chance to finish elementary school before doing the same. But they came to the United States with a tremendous work ethic and big dreams. For 40 years, my father helped provide for our family by working as a short order cook. If you're wondering what that means, if you've ever been out for breakfast, think of who's scrambling eggs and flipping pancakes when you place that order. That's what my dad did for 40 years. For the same 40 years, my mom used to clean houses. So needless to say, it's hard work, honest work. And on those modest incomes, they raised three of us. I have an older sister who's been an educator her entire career, from TA to teacher to assistant principal to principal. She's now in administration for the Los Angeles Unified School District. Have a younger brother who is now chief of staff to the Los Angeles City Council President, Nuri Martinez. So we're all in public service, which is not a coincidence, because among the things that our parents instilled in us, it was the importance of getting a good education. In addition to that, it was always finding opportunities to serve others. Right. So if you paid close enough attention, you take away two things. Number one, my brother, my sister, and I are all in public service. Number two, I'm the middle child, which probably explains a lot. I just happen to be the middle child that makes an occasional headline, including, as I mentioned earlier, and I hope we're able to celebrate, being the first Latino to represent California in the U.S. Senate. Larissa, you mentioned it. Nearly 40% of the California population is Latino. So there's not any issue that's not a Latino issue, and there's not a Latino issue that's not an everybody issue in California because of our population. And we can go out through the course of history. There's a long list of important issues to discuss, none more urgent than COVID, right? And how we position our communities and the country to recover from the COVID pandemic, yes, from a health perspective, also from an economic perspective, from a broad infrastructure perspective, right? Education, healthcare, housing, and more, in a way that's equitable for our community. And as I look back on the history for some lessons here, there's the good news and bad news. It seems like some milestones and victories that we've had from many years ago are once again being relitigated. Right? If we're in Latino Heritage Month, it's been about 50 years since Cesar Chavez was making tremendous headway organizing what would become the United Farm Workers and some of the early contracts for farm workers. Yet the Supreme Court today is making the organizing work of the UFW harder by repealing laws. Years and years ago, it was the Mendez family. Sylvia Mendez, a student at the Westminster School District in Orange County, a precursor case, Mendez versus Westminster, that folded into what we know as Brown versus the Board of Education. Tremendous contributions of Latino leaders and activists back then. And we're still relitigating equity in education funding, not just in California, but throughout the country. And of course, one of my heroes, Willie Velasquez, his adage, su voto es su voz. He founded the Southwest Voter Registration Education Project, helped make tremendous inroads in our participation in the political process, earned him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And yet our fundamental right to vote is being challenged by the Republican Party and so many of my Republican colleagues in the Senate, that it's hard to imagine that we have to relitigate our fundamental right to vote, but we have to and we will. And so on these issues and so many, I'm just grateful to CARAS in San Francisco and all the allied organizations joining us today for your tremendous partnership and activism and advocacy, and looking forward to your questions tonight. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Senator. So glad to have you again. So next I'd like to introduce Commissioner Sara Susa. She's a member of the Immigrant Rights Commissioner, and she's also legislative aide to San Francisco Board of Supervisors member Erin Peskin, and she is on her time off to join us this afternoon.
First, I want to thank Carecen for your leadership and leading on the Latinx agenda and prioritizing immigration for immigrants like me who have been living this country as an undocumented leader who is in hope that the Congress will take action for the 11 million families, TPS holders, DACA recipients, farm workers who fed us through the pandemic, and in many essential workers who are struggling, living in fear due to the lack of action on immigration. As we all know, the last immigration reform that passed was during 1986, the year I was actually born. I'm not going to go over the statistics. It's mainly addressing what's your position as the leader in California to push for immigration reform as part of the budget reconciliation and really championing immigrant rights. As you are someone that represents and understands our experience, we hope that you can elaborate your priority in advancing immigration reform now, because this is the time 70% of American voters support immigration reform. So I just want to conclude my question by saying, what do you think the consequences will be to the Democratic Party, but most importantly to the immigrant community if Democrats fail to deliver this time? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And I couldn't agree more. The time is now. I mean, it's overdue. Immigration reform is overdue. We've seen the ups and downs over the years. And so, when I came into the Senate earlier this year, I made it be clear, unabashedly so, that this was a top priority for me: COVID response, immigration reform. And so, let me just remind us here of the context here. The reason we're having a budget reconciliation conversation specifically is because our Republican colleagues refuse to do anything. Right, Republican members of Congress say, well, this should be done bipartisan, this should be done bipartisan. Okay, well, don't just talk about it, be about it. What are you willing to vote for? They say publicly they support Dreamers, but privately they'll say, oh, but I can't vote for that until we get the situation at the border under control, as if it's some mystery that's never happened before. We have a lot of Republicans that will tell me behind closed doors, oh my gosh, the economy in my state would be nowhere without the contribution of immigrants. I think farm workers are maybe one of the best examples of that. But then publicly they can't bring themselves to vote yes because it might make President Biden look good. Like it's hypocritical. And the people suffering the most are our communities. So they have left us no choice but to pursue this budget reconciliation process as a means for immigration reform. I know we've had some initial discouraging news from the Office of the Parliamentarian on initial proposals that we put in front of her, but we're not giving up. We have a plan B, a C, a D, and E to bring about security for as many Dreamers, TPS holders, not just farm workers, but frankly, farm workers and the Farm Workforce Modernization Act is what inspired my first bill, the Citizenship for Essential Workers Act. The very first bill I introduced in Congress, in the Senate, was that, and inspired by farm workers and all essential workers and the COVID-19 pandemic, right? In my opinion, people who are now considered essential workers by the federal government have been essential for a long time, not just this last year and a half, but especially during the pandemic, the people who could not Zoom into work, the people who put their health and their lives on the line, and that of their families, by the way, to keep the supply chains moving, to keep the economy moving. Here's a stat that should be helpful for all of us when we're talking about this. More than 5 million undocumented immigrants working as essential workers, recognized by the federal government. If we want to praise them as heroes for their service and sacrifice during the pandemic, then we need to treat them as heroes, and that means security and a pathway to citizenship. So bottom line is, I'm going to keep fighting, not just as your senator, but as the chair of the Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration, to make sure we get to yes through this budget reconciliation process.
Thank you, Senator. We were just out there with 15 TPS and Dreamers in Washington, D.C., and Sara was one of our San Francisco delegation members. We cannot accept that a non-elected official, such as the parliamentarian, would determine the future of 11 million plus migrants and their children in this country. So we stand behind you and we want to see this make it to the finish line. Next, I'd like to introduce Commissioner Mario Paz. He's the Executive Director of Good Samaritan Family Resource Center, and he's also the Vice Chair of the San Francisco Immigrant Rights Commission.
Thank you, Larissa. And Senator Padilla, it's truly an honor. Your life's journey and your career is truly an inspiration. It resonates with so many of us. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
I will not get into the stats about the disparities in California and what California families are facing, because I think you know those well. But one thing we can all agree on, the fate of the future prosperity of our state and our nation is interdependent, intertwined with the fate and prosperity of the Latino community in California. And I think you know that well. And with that said, given the multiple barriers and the multiple barriers for poor and working families that are faced in our state with regards to access to decent and affordable housing, educational attainment, and access to affordable medical homes, what is your focus at the federal level, and in particular to ensure immigrants and disconnected communities are not left behind? And what can the federal government learn from the innovative programs that we're trying here in California?
Yeah, well, I think that there's a lot the federal government can learn from what we're doing here in California, right? It's another one of many ways that California leads the nation, leads the way. Look, I'm encouraged and optimistic. If I'll ask you all to just consider this, between President Biden, Vice President Harris, how many times have you heard them use the terms equity and inclusion in all aspects of policy and initiatives that they're pursuing? And compare that to, have you ever heard this really coming from the mouth of the president and the vice president of the United States? I don't think so. Maybe it's not easily done, but the fact that we are viewing investments in education and healthcare, vaccine distribution is probably one of the better examples, not perfect, one of the better examples, but also transportation infrastructure, healthcare, of course, water infrastructure, et cetera, through those very lenses. It makes me optimistic. So it's a reminder that it's not just my job to work with my colleagues to make sure that we're making more significant investments in all areas of infrastructure, not smaller. We got to go big, we got to go bold, but it's not just the dollar figures, making sure that those investments are reaching the communities that need it the most and have most often been written out in prior significant investments in our infrastructure. Of course, education, you look at the kids in the classroom today, very different than the kids in the classroom 40 years ago. So our education strategies have to reflect that changes. We've got to do better by English learners and others, for example. We know where COVID hit the hardest. It was our community. And so from vaccine to assistance for families struggling to pay the rent, keep up with their mortgages, or recover from job loss, we have to go where the need was the greatest. But even in transportation infrastructure, I know it's across the bay, but when freeways were built, in and through Oakland in years past, it had the effect of dividing communities. So we got to keep that in mind if we're going to invest in transportation and public transit, how we use new investments in a way that reunites communities, uplifts communities. And by the way, all the jobs that we're claiming to be creating in the process, help make sure that our communities are able to participate from those opportunities. And it's not just workers coming in from elsewhere, doing the job, making the money, and then leaving again. We got to make sure we're building intergenerational wealth in our communities along the way. So a lot of layers to this. Maybe that's why it's taking us a little bit longer to finally get it done, but I'm optimistic that we're going to get both infrastructure bills to the president's desk here in the near future.
Thank you, Senator. Next, I'd like to invite Selena Lucero, Executive Director of Horizons Unlimited, and also representative from the Latino Task Force on COVID for the city's COVID recovery plan.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Larissa, for having me. Senator Padilla, it's an honor to be here with you. We know, as you've just mentioned, that the pandemic has disproportionately hit our Latino community. We know that recovery is going to be long-term. It will require immense government resources, but really what we're looking at is an authentic partnership with the community. We've noticed that our model has worked. We're leading the country in so many different wins with the COVID pandemic. Three takeaways for our recovery efforts when we're looking forward is that we can't return to normal because we know normal wasn't working for us. We need to make systemic changes in the way that we move forward. We need to develop a long-term collective impact strategy that really centers community voice, that is community-led in partnership with our political leaders and policymakers. And last, that it needs to be long-term in terms of a commitment to recovery. My question in looking at that is San Francisco has led the way in so many different areas around response and recovery, something that we're very proud of. Our group is rapidly developing a recovery strategy that looks well beyond COVID to eliminate the longstanding systemic inequities that have harmed our community for decades and kept it from truly thriving. We would like to know the steps we can take to develop an effective strategy and an effective partnership with you and your office to get your full support behind our plan when completed and what that might look like.
Great. No, I appreciate the question and frankly the offer for ongoing partnership. Right, there's a reason we are here tonight, and it's because of my commitment to not just say, oh, okay, I know it all, and I'll be our voice in the Senate. That's not how it works. You know, it has to be a two-way street. And especially for the communities that have not historically had the constructive working relationships with elected representatives at all levels of government. You know, I think that's a part of, you know, when I say it's not just my opportunity to be a U.S. Senator, but my responsibility for doing it the right way. This is part of my responsibility to be uplifting not just your voices, but your ideas. If you have a successful model for how we organize our community to better respond to COVID, you know, how to move resources where they're needed, then we should be supporting you and replicating that model in communities throughout California, and be able to brag with my colleagues around the country that we know how to do it well. Because guess what? As you all know, demographics are shifting in every state in the nation, and my colleagues are starting to come to me, whether it's, you know, from states with historic Latino populations or states where the Latino community is still very young but growing very rapidly. How do we do this? How do we do this? How do we do this? So I can point them to this coalition as the model.
Thank you, Senator. And I also want to acknowledge that we have participants both through the Zoom meeting, but also who are tuning in through Facebook Live, through our YouTube channel. We have people who registered today who are coming from other parts of, well, from Mesoamerica and from other states throughout the country, particularly members of Alianza Americas and other national coalitions for immigrant justice. Next, I'd like to introduce Carlos Solorzano Cuadra. He's the CEO of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of San Francisco. We felt it was important to include the voice of merchants because San Francisco is a small business city. And so without further, Carlos.
Muchísimas gracias, senador Padilla. Un gusto, un placer y un honor tenerlo aquí en nuestro bello San Francisco y el área de la Bahía. Bienvenido y gracias por estar con nosotros.
Con gusto.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. It's an honor. It says welcome into the beautiful San Francisco and the Bay Area. As you know, we live we are the 5th largest economy in the world. California small business represent close to 50% of the total private sector. And I got to add to that 10% of that are small business owners that are undocumented on top of that. So they not only are undocumented, they also provide jobs to other undocumented and to other people that are legally documented. So we're working towards getting that closure to be able to have them working closer and supporting more the economy. As you know, the top economies with us are accommodations and food, healthcare and social assistance, professional services, scientific and technical services, construction and retail trade. As of August 2021, the state of California unemployment rate was 7.5%. An estimated 35.5% of the small business had closed permanently since the pandemic. But not only that, just in the San Francisco area, 39% of Latino small business closed permanently. We're desperate need to help us grow the economy. With many Latinos immigrants and with many minorities, small businesses that were not able to access the PPP loans, they were not able to get EIDL loans. And that was because We have language barriers. We have technology. We had the migration issues that it prevent them, as I said, with being with being undocumented on that. And with all that, we want to know what will you do as a senator, which is, we're very proud of you having a Latino senator there, to ensure that the nation, and especially the Biden-Harris administration, will help advance the Build Back Together, Build Back Better. The economic recovery agenda is very important, not only to us as Latinos, as minorities, but also to the United States in general. The communities of color, the immigrant, women, and queer-owned businesses. And just to let you know also that from every 10 new business in California, 8 are being made by women. So that's the importance of the support we have. We need to have more access to the EIDL, to low interest loans, to long-term affordable leases. And in general, we need to be actively included in every recovery for the economic future of our country.
Gracias, Carlos.
Let me say just a couple of things quickly. One, I hear you. I know in 2020, under the prior administration, there was significant relief for businesses that was approved, and the vast majority did not make its way to small businesses. It was the larger industries that have, the bigger financial institutions behind them that taught them how to leverage and bring down those federal funding pretty quickly, or the accounting and legal firm capacity. A lot of small businesses don't have that. And so we had to rectify that starting this year. So we're very well aware of that, number one. Number two, as part of the Biden administration, I think smart early moves in the administration was appointing California's own Isabel Guzman as head of the Small Business Administration. And these were some of the very questions I had for her when she was coming through for confirmation. These were some of the very commitments that she made when she was being confirmed by the Senate. So another area for us to work together to make sure that we have either her or one of her top deputies working hand in hand with us to make sure that as the funding flows and the new strategies of the SBA are very much with this top of mind. But the last thing I'll mention, it's a bigger picture because it's both from an economic standpoint and our immigration advocacy standpoint. Two things that I know you know already. A lot of people talk about California as the most populous state in the nation, the most diverse state in the nation, home to more immigrants than any state in the nation. And it frustrates me because it seems like people paint that as one speech, and very different is another speech about California being the 5th largest economy in the world. Right? They go together. California has the largest economy of any state in the nation. If immigrants were a drain on the economy, that wouldn't be the case. We have a strong economy because of the contributions of immigrants as workforce, as consumers, as entrepreneurs. And so it's yet another reason for why we need the immigration reform at the federal level. It's an economic stimulus strategy. And it happens to be the morally right thing to do for families that have been waiting for years and years and years for what they deserve. So please keep that in mind as you continue your activism and your advocacy.
Thank you, Senator. I know you have a hard stop, but I want to acknowledge some members of our audience. In the Bay Area, we care incredibly. I can't even underscore how much we care about the reunification of children separated from their families, by zero tolerance, by the Title 42 continuation of the border closure. And so I just want to reflect to you one of the comments on the chat. And it says, the Biden's task force was set up to reunify the children. Who's holding them accountable? How do we know if they're making substantial progress? And and as we know, when we started the Caravana por los Niños campaign in to mark the first 100 days of the Biden-Harris administration in office, we were talking about 600 children, give or take, that were still separated from zero tolerance. Today, we have more than 1,800 children. So we're not making progress. It seems like we're stepping backwards. I just want to lift that for you, Senator, because that is at the tip of the arrow for us in the Bay Area. if we can't do by those children, then we have a long way to go for the bigger agendas that we care about, including Latinx equity agenda. I want to thank you so much for your time. I know you have a tremendous battle for 11 plus million people, plus all of the state of California and the nation that you represent. We thank you for your time. We thank you for your partnership. I want to appreciate our panelists who joined us. We apologize that this was a short time, and also want to give a special appreciations to your team for helping us coordinate today's town hall. We look forward to hosting you in San Francisco, walking you through the Latino hub, taking you to low barrier testing sites, meeting the merchants in our commercial corridors. And again, count on us for our partnership. We're proud of you. We look forward to seeing other men and women, Latinx members of our community in offices sitting next to you. But again, thank you so much. Gracias a todos. This session is, you can find it on Facebook and also on YouTube, Carecen's channels. I think also on the Senator's channels as well. So again, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to hand it to you for closing remarks, Senator.
No, just thank you everybody for what you do. Keep hope alive, but keep fighting. That's what I do each and every day. La próxima que sea en persona. So I hope to do this with you again in person soon. But in the meantime, síganse cuidando. Please keep wearing your face mask, get your vaccines if you haven't already. That's how we can best protect ourselves and our families and get to the other side of this pandemic. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Senator. And I'm saying, what about the answer? I think the Senator's watching out for the kids. So we're just going to leave him with that. Thank you again. And everyone be healthy, be strong. Y la lucha sigue, si se puede. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Y hay que apoyar para cuando sea la reelección también. We have to support for re-election. We need to keep the Latinos in the house.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Gracias,
Larissa.
Muchas gracias a todos for joining and tuning in via YouTube or also any of our social media channels. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Larissa, and to your staff, Juan and everyone for putting this together.
Excellent.
Wonderful. Great job.
Thank you, Juan, and everybody else behind you.
Yeah.
Have a great day, everybody.